You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in the veterinary space every week. Ivan, why don't you go and introduce today's guest?
Hey, my name is Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce you to my friend Julien Renard, who is a veterinarian who graduated from, and I'm going to screw this up, from the University de Liège. How do you pronounce it again?
Liège.
Okay, that's what I said. So he studied in Belgium. So he also studied business and management at the Brussels Management School. He's a co-founder of Vetstoria. Therefore, we're going to talk about online scheduling and anything that is innovative in that area. On the personal side of things, he travels a lot. He recently traveled to Orlando, Newport. That sounds like probably a lot of conference traveling. The Hague, Chicago, Paris, London, and New York. Yeah, sounds like a lot of conferences. As the CEO and the founder of Vetstoria, it's been, we've known each other for, I think, over 5 years, bumped into each other at the trade shows. And so on the personal side of things, also what I know about Julien, he is from Belgium, and then, but he resides in England, and he has an accent in both languages. So it's really hard to say which language is native.
The only thing I know is a very bad mix. It doesn't sound good.
No, it's good. It works well in North America to meet people. There's a very interesting statistic on your website that we've noticed. So it says that 52% of the appointments are booked outside of business hours. I think it's really cool, and I would like to probably open up with why is that important, and how does that influence your product, and was it sort of the decision-making point?
So this 52/50 depends on the practice. Sometimes it's 48, doesn't really matter, but 50%, and it's been consistently a number that we have from the start. So since day one, the clients are booking half of the appointment outside the normal working hours. So what it means, it just simply means one thing, is that clients are willing to schedule an appointment when the practices are closed. And this is something that we as customer are actually doing every day. We like to own a little bit more about our, customer experience, and clients are expecting exactly the same thing. They have exactly the same expectation with their vet than, the hairdresser or the next plane they are going to schedule online. So this is exactly what we provide. So we provide an online scheduling system for the practice. It allows them to be available 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Really, clients like to schedule when it's convenient for them. That's what we offer.
So was that the statistics that you found after you started the product, or that's something that you thought about to start the product?
No, after. Honestly, we had no idea before starting. We started probably with one of the first ones, starting that like 5 years ago, or 4.5 years ago. We had no idea.
What other interesting statistics have you learned along the way about the use of your product?
There is 2 additional data. One is the percentage of mobile user, and that's actually a data which has been changing from the start. We used to be at 45% of mobile booking 4 or 5 years ago. We are now at 60%. So the mobile usage has definitely been growing. So that's one aspect. The third data is really about new clients. Online booking is a key channel for clinic to acquire new customer. It's very simple to understand. Like all of us, if we want to use a new service or buy a new product, we are just going to go online, check, do I like this product? Do I like this service? And then you have the call to action and you buy it or you schedule it or whatever. Well, online booking for your practice is not different. The fact that you have a button, or clinic has a button, schedule an appointment online on their website, it allows them to transform a website visitor, a potential new customer, into a customer by just making it very easy for them to schedule their first appointment. So this data is 17%. So that's an average. We have clinics which are booking much more than that as new clients. When I say much more, we're looking double digit and starting by 2. So we have clinics which are booking 25% of new clients. Usually it's clinics who have a strong marketing strategy behind them.
Mhm.
And I would say some of the corporates are very good at that. Really, they put a lot of energy into acquiring new customer, and we are a piece of the acquisition puzzle they've been building. And we have clinics which are more like 10, 12 because they make less effort, but also they have more existing client scheduling. So because they have more existing, I would say the percentage of new clients is dropping a little bit.
So let's unwrap that a little bit. I like what you said about marketing. You know, this is one of the passions of mine. When you're saying a part of their acquisition model, you mean that when the clinics are sending out the marketing campaign, so for example, for dental month or, don't forget your vaccination, then the emails that they're sending, they would have, a description of the service that is suggested, or it's a reminder, and then the call to action, which is the button in the email, leads directly to the booking page. Is that what you're...
So there is two types of marketing. What you describe here is marketing for existing clients. You don't sell a dental campaign to non-clients. So that's marketing to existing client, typically vaccination reminder, which is I would say what every single practice should do. But yes, you have dental, I want to say nurturing amnesty and things like this. But one of the key aspects is marketing to new client, acquiring new customer. So that's very much Google AdWords, retargeting, things like this, or social media campaign. And we can be a piece of this puzzle.
That's excellent. So do you see a lot of corporates using the retargeting and AdWords and things like that? Are they now tapping into that?
It's definitely happening. Some have started and some are starting. But for sure, this is what's very exciting about online booking, because as you are a bit of a king of marketing, so you know that, I mean, marketing, there is a big challenge is measuring the return investment.
Right.
Okay, and for practice, they need to contact the local marketing agency or whatever, and then you tell them, okay, give us a budget of this, and we are going to generate X. The problem is that to actually have the final X, is rather complex, because when people start driving online traffic, the last piece of the journey is have to make a call to schedule your appointment. Well, when they can book online and when we can follow, I would say, the path of this client these leads from the start, and you can know exactly how many new clients you've been generating at the end of your marketing activity, it gives the practice a very precise idea of the return investment. They know that they've invested X, and they know that at the end of the journey, they've been generating X new clients. If they put in the equation the lifetime value of a new client, they know exactly if it's worth the investment or not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's brilliant. And you're absolutely right. When I was looking, at the different solutions in your domain, in the online booking, that is the final call to action that actually determines that KPI of the effectiveness of your marketing. It used to be the phone ringing, but then nobody records that. And if you're a consolidator, you can't count the phone calls, and neither anybody does that. So that's brilliant. Now, your story is very similar to mine, and you're a veterinarian just like myself. And then we decided to shift gears and build something. And then all our relatives told us that we're idiots, that we should go back to be veterinarians.
Oh, they still say that.
Yours didn't, mine did. And then especially my father-in-law, he said, that's a stupid idea, and which was basically a guarantee that it's a good idea. So
yeah.
That's a shout out to your father-in-law, right?
Yeah, shout out to my father-in-law. He doesn't speak English, so I don't think he'll listen to this one. But he's a good guy. He just doesn't like workflow optimization tools in veterinary clinics because he makes honey.
Now it sounds like your wife may be listening to our podcast.
Well, that's a safety. That's I just inserted. So with that story, you change what you want to do, then you pick this topic, and then or this niche, and then you tapped into it. But your real sort of hockey stick started happening from sort of 2015, if I remember correctly, or 2016. Yeah. What was, first of all, that initial couple years? How did you fund it? Did you borrow money from your mom or your friends, family, and fools? And were you funding it as a veterinarian? And then what was that pivotal point where it started to improve, and how did that feel?
Well, I started the company with my friend Julien. We met at the vet school, and exactly like you, we basically were working nights, doing night shift and working on Vetstoria during the day. We started working on the initial application we built it was a pet portal. It was a bit like a pet desk, Vet2Pet, Vitus Vet application. It was before that, and probably wrong timing, and we probably have not executed the product as we should. We had customer, but the traction, at least in the UK, was not great. I mean, we are with customer, but the growth that we were planning to have was not there. And we simply had a request of clients saying, okay, well, by the way, it would be great if we could have online booking in your application. And we just say, okay, sounds interesting. And we simply build it. But what we did at that time, it was a smart move at that time. I'm quite proud of myself or of the team. I'm not alone there. We actually built it as an add-on, okay, and potentially could be used separately. And what we saw is simply the traction on the online booking tool was, I mean, at a completely different scale than what we had on the pet portal. So I'm not saying that pet portal are not good, by the way. I think it's very, very good. But the way we did it at that time was not the best thing we did. We did the online booking and learned from the previous mistake. There's also one thing that was challenging at that time. You know, in the US, there is vet data and there is no data point. We were in the UK, and in the UK, there is no vet data or data point. So we had to convince the practice management software to actually work with us, build an API to work with us. So it was a very long journey because we had to convince all of them one-to-one to build an API.
Well, we've been on that journey with you. It's
yes.
that's exactly
that's a reoccurring theme on this podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
We definitely struggle with that. There was a lot of one-on-ones that we built before the vet data or data point existed. But that's a really interesting path. And then what I also know, which I never tapped into, you went different languages too.
Yes.
So maybe that's because you're bilingual, but you went languages that you don't speak. You went to Netherlands.
Chinese.
Are you in Asia as well?
Yeah.
Wow. So there's, your global distribution is quite phenomenal. So your biggest market, as far as I remember, in the early days was in Australia, out of all the places.
Australia and actually Holland.
Yep.
With IDEX Animana. Holland was interesting because we went where we had partners, and RxWorks, who was Australian-based software, and IDEX Animana, which is in Holland, were kind of our two first partners. And we just went there. So interestingly, Holland is a very interesting market to test features and products. Big companies such as LinkedIn, for example, are testing new features in Holland. Probably the way people use technology there, it's a very small country. There's a lot of practices, there's a lot of people there, and there is a lot of competition in between vets. So for us, it was a very interesting market simply because there was a lot of traction there. Vets are very well engaged when it comes to marketing.
That makes me think of a question it's kind of a burning question for me, Julien. I've been in and around the trade show circuit for the last 3, almost 4 years now. And my favorite booth mates are these marketing companies that are unbelievable in their approach, very persuasive. I've heard them described by people as a cross between a used car salesperson and the worst person they've ever met. And I'm not going to say any companies in particular. I think that, our listeners know who they are, but I'd like you to comment on that, and your insight on that. How does a veterinarian see through the fog of all of these people that want to sell them a templated website for $5,000 to $10,000 and get some real assistance that can drive dollars to their bottom line? Do you have any suggestions? Because what I see, I don't really like. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
To be honest, I mean, we've been discussing this with Ivan quite a lot recently. I mean, it's always a problem of marketing. I think it's back to what I was saying earlier. When we give the tool to a vet or to any business to actually measure the return investment of their marketing activity, I think it's pretty straightforward. Okay. If you know that actually you can see how much you are generating, the practice can make their own decision themselves. The problem with marketing is that when you don't know actually how much you're going to get at the end. So for me, the only way to resolve this is through data. When you can provide the data showing actually and proving that you have been delivering, nothing can go wrong. When the numbers are there at the end, for me, that's the only way really to actually avoid this kind of issue.
Well, and sometimes it's hard to maybe design up front, and good marketers can say that this is a return on investment when they tap into a new niche. And these guys, they've been around, the ones that you're talking about, Shawn. But if someone comes into the new industry, they may not know the exact response of the audience. But very quickly, when they start, as long as they measure the right things, you can understand are you doing the right things or not. Because the worst thing is, marketing before sort of 2000s. There's a marketing budget that you have to just spend, and then you print, envelopes, give pens away at the conferences. You have zero understanding where this money goes. And then the only way in the clinic to understand is when your phone rings, which nobody records the quantity. So really you're just wasting money on, your kids' football team T-shirts and, stuff like that has any impact or relevance, and then you just hope for the best. So right now in digital age, I think it's pure science, data driven, and you can't approach it otherwise.
And I agree with all of that stuff. And I think what I'm trying to dig at, and either one of you guys answer this question if you can for our listeners, is how do they pick a good marketing company? Yeah, sure, data, it has to be data driven, but there's so many of these companies that want to sell these unsophisticated marketers, which are some of our listeners. They want to sell them a $10,000 website, and $10,000 is a lot of money, and there's no ROI. So how do they even go about assessing those companies to make sure that they make a good decision and then have a return on that investment? Any suggestions?
I think references, that's really, if they've been around for a long time, ask their clients to tell about them, and then ask smart questions. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I like it. That's good.
Yeah, I agree. Plus data. When you have picked up your favorite horse, you just go for it. And then I think also probably the expected timeline to see results should be fixed from the start. Okay. These are 1, 2, or 3 KPI that we would like to achieve in 3 and 6 months. And if you don't achieve it, you have to take the necessary decision.
Yeah, you have
to. And then
to.
I would add a third thing too, like, just follow the 3 quote thing. Get a couple of quotes. Don't just take, the offer because somebody's pressuring you to take it. Yeah, it's just interesting observing that over and over again at these shows over the last couple of years.
But the other thing, Shawn, is when you are taking or doing the experiment with some sort of company, after you collected your references, after, you had a conversation which you get with a salesperson, you need to start, you need to set the limit, and then you need to cut it if it's not working. But the important thing is that I was just talking to a CEO of a manufacturing company, a friend of mine, and he said he doesn't know much about digital. They make socks. He owns the factory, he makes socks, a gazillion of them. But then I was talking about marketing. I'm passionate about it. And he's like, oh, marketing is the first budget that we cut. He's like, these losers, I hired one. And then after 2 months, nothing changed. So you really need to stick with it, because if you're talking about true digital marketing with the effects of it, you need to look about 6 months into, to see the return and the proper, SEO propagation and the linkage and the, like, all of those things to collect enough data. But then after 6 months, if you don't have the result, you have to cut them loose and and use someone else.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Cool. So I wanted to kind of talk a little more through the international experience, because I've been in this talk and someone invited me to talk about the global expansion of the company, and they invited me and they said, can you talk about penetration of the global markets? And it was all these guys, that been working at the big companies, and they wanted to know how, the strategy is built to go global. And then as a startup, it sounds like, Julien, your story is very similar to mine. My story was, I was sitting in the demo, someone booked a demo with me, and then I heard a funny accent. And then after, at the end of the demo, I found out it was an Australian guy. And then at the end, you say, where do I put my credit card? And then now we have an international, Australian customer. And all of a sudden you have to build support, you have to build sales, you have to now support that market. So I think that the big company perspective was, you throw an idea that we're going to, penetrate Australian market, and then you build a plan and the strategy around it. You do the budgeting, and then you deploy this, and then you do that. And then in reality, when you're an agile startup, you kind of go with the flow. You really get your customers, and then if if it bites, then you start building infrastructure around it. So is that your experience?
That's totally the case. I mean, as I said, the first step was, can we actually work there? And which for us, the main condition was we need to have a PMS that we can integrate with. Then getting a few customer, all right, do they like it? And when we have a proof that there is actually a market there for us, we set up the strategy around this and sales and marketing. Absolutely. It's much less planned than
it's less sophisticated than they can.
Yes. Well, actually, to be honest, for example, in the US, in the US now, we have a much more strategic approach now, because we used to sell from the UK, but now we are setting up an office in Texas. And I would say for that kind of markets, we are thinking and planning much more strategically than what we have done in the past. I mean, there are also countries which are less important. I mean, we have customer in Czech Republic.
I have a friend from Czech Republic. He'll tell you how less important the country is.
So I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying for us as a targeted country, there's probably a little bit less potential. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, no, and that's, and we never closed the doors to any country. And
same for us.
You're buying our software, use it. Yeah. And, we'll have limitation on supporting your language. If you're okay to use it, you're welcome. Yeah. And I know that, some companies, because of the infrastructure, they have difficulty doing that. But with the global availability of just put the credit card, even if you're in some foreign country that doesn't support your payment system, but your payment system will take dollars. So just do it. I think for any startup, instead of trying to think regionally and stuff like that, because the one thing that I found about Australians, just like you said about Netherlands, we never got to Netherlands just because we were afraid of language, but Australia was very interesting. Again, they were super eager and fast decision makers. Compared to Canada, I think that I find, unfortunately, I live in Canada and I love Canada, but there's such terrible decision makers. Sorry, Shawn. They'll be like, oh, that's great. And, we'll think about it. Australians, that's the only country where on the demo they said, where do I put my credit card in? And that was important to us.
I agree. And same for the Dutch. But one thing which is interesting, actually, working internationally like this, is seeing the difference of setup and the different way vet practice actually work. There's some big difference. I mean, for example, if you look at a US clinic, US vets are usually delivering a consultation minimum 20 minutes, but 30 minutes is extremely frequent. If you come in the UK, most of the practices are on a 15 minutes duration consultation. So there's some big difference. I mean, when you talk about like half the time, you can imagine the number of consultations per vet is pretty different at the end of the day. So that's some key difference like this, which we have been observing. And there's a lot of difference in between the countries.
When you mention about the difference in how they practice medicine, that's also important when you're building your technology towards that, because you can really, in workflow optimization, when we build SmartFlow, when we came to Netherlands, and especially in the UK, they have shorter appointments, but at the same time, the big difference that I kind of got burned on, because I was pitching, the way I'm used to practice, and Canada and US is similar, where we send the technician or the nurse into the exam room first. Well, in the UK, that's not the case. They just go in.
That's correct.
And the nurses are truly the engine that work in the back of the clinic. And that's, from workflow perspective, it was extremely important. I was trying, first 2 London vet shows, I was trying to convince them that this is how you optimize your technicians in the room. And they're like, we don't send those. And
we don't do this. Thank you very much.
Exactly. And then in South Africa, I don't know if you have any practices there, it's a completely different flow. They have like these grades of assistants and technicians. They have whatever you call them, epaulets, or like on the uniform. Like it was different. And, yes, it's medicine, but the whole flow is different.
And also the size of the clinic. I mean, if you go in Germany, the majority of the clinic are 1, sometimes two vets. If you go in Sweden, it's much bigger practices. So that has a direct impact on the workflow and the way consultations are delivered, for sure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.